I knew it had been deliberately done, and thanked them in my unverbalized thoughts for the wonderful memories we shared, and now it was time to start living differently. Then I contemplated that probably none of them was ever going to see me again. Obviously, Magda felt triumphant about Jehovah having brought all her possessions, namely her children, back to her in answer to her prayers. Years later, when Birgit, by a freak coincidence, met me with her friend, when I was enjoying a cup of coffee at the Meyer Store's coffee lounge in the city, she asked me if I remembered her as she approached me from behind. She was grown up and a very pretty young lady. She immediately exclaimed that so many things had happened since she left, all those years ago. Then she promptly told me that her mother had been only telling the truth, and I was not at all a good person. No matter how untrue, she, like her mother, had to be always right in regard to my character being not at all a good person. I was right in thinking when I said children learn what they live, as we discover in Desiderata. During our subsequent meetings, she told me that she now had her own child from a man who was a country singer and Vietnam veteran. Apparently, he was an extremely caring person. According to gossip, her sister was having an affair with him long before, and was probably still in a permanent relationship. He was also supposedly interested in the truth, according to Birgit. But as far as I knew, he was interested in occult, and was close friends with Wendy Clark I had met through my associations with other groups, and, as Wendy told me, poor John's current partner was causing hell for him and wanting to separate, demanding that his house be given to her. When visiting Wendy, I saw photographs of him with my daughter and asked if he was the John I knew as Birgit's current partner. She confirmed it was, and the woman in the photograph was the wretched girl trying to destroy him. What I was to understand of it, I could not even begin to guess. I will be telling you more shortly. During that accidental meeting at Meyer Stores, Birgit told me that although I was disfellowshipped, strongly emphasizing, due to me being really wicked, it was now possible to go and sit with her during the Jehovah's Witness services in their Kingdom Hall, and there was one in St. Kilda. However, she seemed adamant not to listen to anything I tried to tell her. For example, for curiosity I went there after my disfellowshipment, but was treated as if being invisible. Nonetheless, she demanded that we should visit that place during the weekend. She further said that when she had permanently left, she wrote her note to tell me she was going to stay with her mother. She thought of pouring petrol all over my goods, especially my speakers, amplifiers, all my books, and burning them. However, every time she wanted to use the matchsticks to test how good things would go up in flames, the matches would not light for some unknown reason, and so she decided not to do it. She was apparently frightened. I asked why she wanted to do something like that, and she answered me saying, "Because, you know, they are cursed, I think, and you do black magic." I had a feeling that she was not by herself when she wanted to do what she did. In fact, I believe either her sister or mother was with her. Later I asked her again if she thought that it would completely destroy me and make me so sad that I would die, and she answered, "You know, Mom never tells lies." I did not need to hear anything else. I knew all that time ago that she was no different than her sister or mother, and certainly not any better than those dogmatic and superstitious witnesses she was part of. You can guess how happy I was when all the wasted years of my life and dreamt of family was no more. I was free. Going back to the time of their leaving me and finding Birgit's kind words as they were, I immediately legally applied for a complete dissolution of all relationships with any members of my so-called family, with the option that maybe one day if any of them wanted to come out of the dark and see me, my doors would be open. I hoped that person would be Claude, because Magda was using every excuse to keep him away from me, as if I was not his father. In fact, for a while I felt I was not my children's father at all, and was living with a fantasy of reality, and she was keeping a secret I was not meant to discover. I was later informed the woman I once loved had been so vindictive under the manipulative advice given by the witnesses that she had taken the children after changing her identity and family name to Johnson and moved to Perth, where she thought she could raise the children as proper witnesses while teaching them to hate the evil in the world, where I apparently belonged, for my religion was electronics, and I seemingly worshipped Satan, which I was not fully cognizant of until Birgit told me. As previously mentioned, Magda was obviously married to Jehovah's Witnesses, who were very capable of doing all kinds of nasties without their adherents being aware, convincing their members to believe they could only tell the truth. It is a religious fanaticism wherein utmost devotion is demanded of their followers, as if they are dedicated to the Creator God. However, unawares, they are in reality obeying rules and regulations conveniently invented by a group of control freaks. Incredibly naive and weak characters like my ex-wife are easily controlled, and with their completely dulled, hypnotically conditioned minds, will do everything as commanded without thinking. I sometimes think that the whole experience I had could only be orchestrated by an evil source in a disguise of seemingly righteous preachers. All those legal expenses were costly, money wasted, and property or investments needed to be disposed of. I could no longer concentrate on anything, not even my work. I needed to take a break and hopefully refresh my mind before any further developments in a positive direction. I believed I could make life work for me and fulfill my dreams. I stayed with Andrea for a little while, but did not want to make her part of my misery, and therefore made the hardest of all decisions. I was going to part for a while, for I had to deal with some of my personal tragedies, with an option that we could get together again, if life did not take a different turn for both of us. Andrea asked me if I missed my family, and I said that there were a few unresolved issues I needed to concentrate on. In fact, with a mind deeply troubled by my own misfortune, I needed some time for myself, although she was more than willing to listen to me. I loved loving her, and not because of her physical charm alone, but for her spirituality and genuine personality. Because of this, I could not allow her to partake in my sufferings. She certainly deserved happiness and not any kind of darkness in her life. I spent some time in spiritual and New Age endeavors, while also spending a lot of time wandering the streets. I felt the need to isolate myself completely from the general public. For a while I lived like a hermit, with a difference. I was amongst crowds of people, but was not part of them. I adopted a policy after being inspired by Pablo Casals, who once exclaimed, "I long for the day when the peoples of the world will sit together, bound by happiness and love of beauty, as in one great concert hall." Now everything was over. Now my daughters had also left me, and I was no longer able to see my beloved son. He had been stolen away from me. In reality, Magda never wanted me to be close to any of my children, believing that I was a bad influence on them for being an unbeliever in their God. With Jehovah's Witnesses dictating every move in Magda's life, the girls were taught to hate the evil, where their father, the devil worshipper, belonged, who they have encouraged to detest. In short, they were forced to hate every move I made. Was I not the soft target they had to direct their absolute hatred at? Many years later, I was to discover that they had built their lives around this belief. When Birgit was a growing-up young lady with her own children, she was still adamantly telling me that I must have been a very violent and rough person, hurting their mother at every opportunity. Their mother was living in a make-believe world, wherefrom she instructed them to believe that she could only tell the truth, for she was a faithful witness. That was a time when the witnesses were, and are still, describing the devil their dear sister had directly experienced by being married to me. When that meeting took place with Birgit after years of separation, she hurt me even further by telling me things from the fullness of her frozen heart, because she did not have any idea about the real truth behind the stories she was force-fed. Alas, she was unwilling to know the reality of things. They were all adamant, telling fictitious stories about me, many of which, according to her friends, were Birgit's own creation. Obviously, none of my supposed children knew me, and had forgotten everything about me. Everything they needed to know about their father had been denied, and Jehovah's Witnesses had become their real parents, with a mother bent to their cultist dictums, which they considered as Christian principles and completely righteous. One tends to ask how such twisted-minded individuals, claiming someone like me as evil, could live with what they accused everybody else of in their assumptions. In reality, who was unjust and evil? I had sacrificed so many things to see my children happy, yet I have been accused of being evil for not believing in man-made myths as true, and not wanting to live in pretend happiness and so-called truth. When the girls left me the way they did, I made my final decision. I was going to disappear after the legal considerations, and was going to give up everything that was, and go somewhere far away. As far as they were concerned, I would disappear altogether, and yet thinking that perhaps one day, if they had any feelings left in them, they could search for me. By this, I was going to give Magda, their righteous mother and faithful sister of Jehovah's Witnesses, a chance to feel proud of her great achievements in destroying my dreams and life. Ultimately, I learned that their love was hatred. Therefore, I still ask Magda, who exists only under the directive of the witnesses, how she could destroy the lives of her own children as well. I will say she preferred to sacrifice them for a cultist organization, which was painted as being Christian and righteous. One day, what is within the heart will come to light. All happy thoughts and ill will be reflected in the face of the beholder. Wait and see. Did I need to regret everything I was or have done? You may be familiar with Catherine Mansfield's words. Regret is an appalling waste of energy. You can't build on it. It's only good for wallowing in. No matter what they prefer to claim in regard to their belief, as if it was the only way to salvation and the only way to please their God. All their activities and the way they conducted their lives were cultist. Any belief system or organization aiming to control the minds of their members and lifestyles is a cult. Some people are blinded with their falsehood, seen as the righteous path, unable to see the light that shineth forth. Maybe they should heed Jesus' advice. When the blind leads the blind, both will fall into the pit. That pit is total ignorance and absolute darkness. Stay within our organization and you will be rewarded. You may need to wait forever for that. It is not much different than advising their adherents to blindfold themselves so that they cannot see anything in the world. Extend your hands, and we will hold them for you, leading you into the truth, which in reality does not exist. The truth will set you free. This is a nice thought, but it may be true only for those who have the courage to look at both sides of the coin and be able to go outside to see the actual reality which surrounds them. Maybe then they can breathe the fresh air and be vitalized. They may even proclaim, "There's life after all." Whenever they advise their followers to stay within their circles, promising that they will be looked after, they should first go outside that circle to see what world exists out there without judgment. They may discover a world of people, mountains, brick-and-mortar cities, crime, wars, and jealousies. It is also a world of freedom and unconditional love. People almost always find what they are looking for, and according to the fullness of their hearts, they are rewarded. On the other hand, love has to be a freedom song and cannot be limited. Life can never function in a world of restrictions. What I am about to say is by no means biased, and it is this. Many man-made belief systems, particularly cultist movements, only keep people in bondage. And any kind of bondage cannot be equated with freedom. Life needs to be free because the entire humanity remains a free agent. There can be no evolvement and no progression in bondage. Therefore, much of life's experiences must never be nullified. Love, the freedom song, must be sung by all, for bondage of any kind in dogmatic organization is darkness. That is the real evil, not the people freed from those ignorant ways of dogma. I realized that with my final decision I could lose everything, but at least I would be able to keep my sanity. I could comfortably live with my fantasized dreams, just like Birgit had suggested when she jotted down her words. "Dad, you have many of our pictures and recordings. You can live with our memories." I cannot and will never forget those words. The only remaining thought for me was this: "Thank you, my little love. It really is you, as expected, and every one of you has been just the same. With your very young minds, you can only think this much, but perhaps one day you will understand things better, when and if you mature." They could not hear me, and I fantasized that perhaps I could send it out into the fabric of the cosmos in thought, and who knows, maybe one day in their future it could be transmitted back at them. But it could be too late, because human life can be interrupted at any time, for there is no certainty on how long we will be able to remain in this physical dimension. I applied for the very last legal action through the family court system, and preferred to represent myself during the final hearing. Magda had employed a solicitor, and almost the entire congregation of the local Jehovah's Witnesses were also present to provide the necessary support for her. They all probably thought that it was going to be a hard battle, for I could sense how they were uttering their silent prayers. They did not realize that being a peace-loving individual, not desiring to separate the family, and knowing that my beloved children were happier without me, I made sure that the hearing was not going to be prolonged or adjourned. Without even giving a chance to be cross-examined by the court, I explained clearly what I had decided, telling them in a few short words that from then onwards I had nothing more to do with my family who were owned by the Jehovah's Witnesses, although my doors would remain open to them if they wanted to see me sometime in the future. I was no longer going to provide for them, and particularly the witnesses, by that bitter experience of my children spending quality time with me, for they all considered me as an evildoer for being disfellowshipped and an atheist. Whenever my children spent time with me, it had been seen as a bitter experience for the entire congregation and their servant Magda. I decided to divorce my entire family for their happiness and possible everlasting life after Armageddon, the end of the world, as Jehovah's Witnesses were preaching for many decades. Like their forever-changing policies and predictions, 1975 came and went, and none of their following prophecies came true. On the other hand, I was no longer prepared to be accused of wrongs as a non-Jehovah's Witness. There was mention of my wealth to be divided on 90% to my former family and 10% to me. That did not sound right, as I thought such divisions were usually on a 50-50 basis. There seems to be some injustice against men when they divorce. In my case, they could have it all, 100%, and then I would be free from the psychological warfare which the witnesses conducted against me. It was a very hard and sad decision, but I had to do it, as I could not see any light at the end of the tunnel, because that tunnel was in complete darkness, created by a very destructive Christian cult. The maintenance of the children was briefly considered, and remained dangling in the air. But by also letting them have my 10%, it was covered. Think of it as being an impossible dream. In my heart, I knew I could make my life work again, without interfering nightmare of Jehovah's Witnesses. Under their strict control of Magda, for years, they have been trying everything to undermine my intelligence, downgrade my individuality, and belittle me in all aspects of my life, and then kick me out. I simply removed myself, sincerely hoping that it pleased Magda and my beloved children, and hopefully it has helped them. I knew that what I decided to do made her controllers feel triumphant beyond words. I was free at last, and waking up from a dreadful nightmare. It felt like being reborn, and soon I was to coordinate my life once more. I was beginning to paint over the canvas previously painted, although I could discard it and start a brand new project using a fresh one. Firstly, I needed to move out from where I had been trying to paint something beautiful on the canvas of life, applying various methods to make it work. However, Jehovah's Witnesses wanted to put their graffiti upon my tableau. As they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. Likewise, too many artists with different outlooks could never achieve beauty and meaning in any painting unless they are well coordinated. Therefore, a brand new canvas needed to be used, along with a new set of paints and brushes. In reality, nobody should attempt to paint someone else's artwork, for it can only be done by the individual artist themselves. For a while I spent time meeting with friends for a friendly chat. I met up with Reg more often, went shopping, listened to his stories, and enjoyed some counter-lunches. I even took a part-time cashier's job with him at a video games venue. The idea behind this exercise was primarily to assist him find some value in living, while also occupying me with something completely different. While spending time at the Theosophical Society, I met new friends, some of whom were real eccentrics. I met a few television newsreaders and made friends. Andreas Gaborfi was certainly very special, for he was maintained that he was from the Central Sun government. He used to take his own images on Super 8mm films, wearing glass lampshades, and claiming he had encountered space people from a variety of other planets. He had the tendency to stop in the middle of the city streets just to ask police officers about what planet they came from. We all had some idea about his state of mind, but out of respect, we appeared to be very serious about his personal traits. He was an artist, spending days to create mandalas and usually giving them away to people, but he may have been selling some of them. According to his own stories, he was once employed in one of the hospitals as an orderly, but after his alleged discovery of an unusual food being served in the hospital, he was dismissed. He told us that he had studied medicine. Andreas spoke perfect Hungarian, and his English was pleasantly accented. However, he adamantly claimed he was Belgian, but he did not speak that language or any French, and when someone made a comment about him being Hungarian, as mentioned earlier, he displayed a great degree of anger, insisting he was from Belgium. When living in Caulfield, in a small bungalow behind a set of flats, which he divided into several compartments using tent canvas, and loved showing some of his specially chosen friends what he had: a collection of doctor's outfits in white, special crystals and photographs of UFOs, newspaper cuttings, and his unique console on a small table with a number of colored stones, crystals, and medium to large-sized old radio tubes with a plastic dome on top, obtained from one of the shops. He believed it was his control mechanism when he communicated with other planets and UFOs. He introduced me to an OAHSPA Bible, telling me that his neighbor had read it and suffered with his intelligence afterwards, as he was apparently not ready for it, or wanted to use it for not so good reasons, losing his marbles due to being possessed. This Bible was apparently talking about the making of the universe, and contained great wisdom for humanity. When I read it, however, I could not find anything which would contribute to a person's mental breakdown. As mentioned, Jumei was a very generous and genuine friend I met for the first time at the Theosophical Society, and she was in love with Andreas. She was also an eccentric about life, and believed that Earth was, like a womb, generating life streams from within. When Natura Health Foods, managed by Mr. John Veldhoven, needed some people to take care of a few important maintenance issues, I volunteered. My 8-year-old daughter Annette was with me during her school holidays, and this is also the time when I was kicked out by Magda and her cohorts. Annette and I became family friends with the Veldhovens. They invited us to stay with them at their home in Boy-Morris for a while. Alas, it was at this time Annette was abducted. My friend's older son suffered from Down syndrome. Out of curiosity, I attended some of their gatherings in a hired room in front of the Theosophical Society building. They belonged to a group they called Abdrushin, following a Swiss-based German-speaking master and philosopher's teachings, wherein reincarnation was accepted as the truth. For a little while, and for friendship, I researched into their belief and was fascinated with their acceptance of reality, which contained elements of Buddhism and Hinduism. It was a study and research on my part, for philosophy has always interested me. This was also a time when a number of eccentrics were interested in getting to know me better. A young man seeking gurus to follow came to my place to be part of my team in his wonderfully dreaming mind. One evening we were still talking about spiritual issues with him, and after Annette went to sleep, I was surprised by his wanting to sleep naked in my bed, just to be blessed by a guru, which was apparently me. However, I let him sleep alone, while I kept awake sitting elsewhere, silently reading my books. In the morning, he was happy having slept in my bed and believed he was now blessed. We certainly meet some very unusual people throughout our lives. At least Annette did not see that young man staying with us that night, as she was sound asleep. I also remember in that room there was an antique cabinet which needed to be restored to its original state, and I had the pleasure of working on it. When my daughter was found, I decided to move on and lost all contact with those gentle friends. When I lived at a Brighton Road address in Elwood for a very short period of time, the noise from the road was unbearable, and so inevitably I had to move out from there. Annette had gone back to her mother's. Devastated and miserable, I moved to Turak and daily frequented the village coffee shops, just to rediscover my place in the world. My music system sounded really fantastic there, thus my listening to music at home was an unforgettable experience. The sound streaming from just 2 channels, stereo, was magically much better and had the same characteristics of surround sound systems, for the acoustics in the lounge were perfect. At this time, I invested in the very first handcrafted CD audio player by Sony. As you can guess, none of my children were with me during that period of time. They were pickled by their loving and completely righteous mother, who apparently never told lies. It felt like a well-deserved holiday. During my employment as the Health and Welfare Liaison Officer with the state government, I met many interesting people. One such person was a former police officer from Turkey and wanted to settle in Australia, needing my help to make it a reality. His application was accepted, and he rented a housing commission flat in Flemington. He used to visit me even long after my employment suddenly came to an end due to the changed political atmosphere. When I started in my position, Joan Kerner was Victorian Premier. One day this Turkish police officer came to my address in Elwood when we were celebrating Birgit's birthday. As can be seen, a long time had passed from the initial separation from my ex-wife, when I was granted custody of my daughters. I remember one time when we walked to St. Kilda and Luna Park with him, he discovered dry human blood on the ground by one of the bus stops, upon which he debated issues concerning criminology. He spoke about his interest in joining the Australian police force. Shortly after, I helped him apply to the Victorian Police, and it was suggested that he first learn English and attend the academy. In this way, he could be recruited, but he expected miracles forthwith. He wanted to start working as a police officer immediately, and exclaimed that he could not wait until he could beat the crap out of people. At first, one took it as a joke, but later understood it to be a policeman's dream in Turkey. While living in Turak, I met him in the city, and when visiting shops I discovered an Italian girl. I became friends with her, and she often visited me in Turak village. And we took lots of pictures of the streets, people, and old chapels. I gave her the gift of a necklace with small diamonds, which I originally bought for one of my daughters as a token of appreciation. But the one who got my gift did not appreciate it, and threw it from the balcony into the backyard. Later I found this rather expensive jewelry and kept it hidden. I was very happy to give it to someone who cared for me, even if this friendship was to last only for a short while. This girl lived in Brunswick with her family and happy to spend some time with me. Previously, I had met some Turkish families and was able to find housing and assist them with their compensation cases. Much later I was told by them that the young Turkish police officer was so angry with me for whatever reason I had no idea about and was planning to kill me. I did not understand why he wanted to do something like that. I could not comprehend what wrong I had done to him. Further research showed that he had discovered I was not a Turkish citizen, but an Armenian dog. Like this story, a number of other Turks I had helped in the past developed similar attitudes towards me because of my background. I was surprised that people had brought their undesirable characteristics and behavior with them when they migrated to Australia. I do not think that the Australian authorities had thoroughly investigated these migrants when they allowed them into the country. One hoped that those attitudes would no longer provide any threats to Australian citizens in the future. However, Jehovah's Witnesses were not any different when discriminating against those who did not follow their footsteps, considering them unworthy to live with the excuse that it was God's will. After what I observed, I toyed with the idea of never associating with certain people anymore. For somebody like me, accepting everybody as they were, it was hard to swallow, because it did not matter for me what nationality, race, or belief system people belonged to. I accepted and loved everyone equally. I always preferred to be kind to everybody and volunteered to assist all wherever and whenever I could. I always wanted to see every human happy and healthy. While completely isolating myself from the wider community, I intermittently kept lecturing on all kinds of subjects from psychology to philosophy. In a short while, I was again involved in a number of club activities: the Astronomical Society, Victorian UFO Research Group, yoga, and meditations to clear my mind from my previous nightmares and to reduce those emotional pains. My then family doctor on Turak Road, Dr. MacDonald, diagnosed my stress-related health concerns and asthma for the first time. He advised that my emotional state would not threaten my health for long as I was in control, but my asthma could be a lifelong issue. The medications he prescribed were excellent, for which I was grateful, and was very saddened upon discovery of his passing due to ill health. I loved living in Turak, although at times the place could be a little noisy with trams, cars, buses, and lorries. When the place I lived in was sold and various architectural changes were planned, I decided to move to a nearby flat on Williams Road. I was ultimately planning to travel to Britain. My intention was to stay in London for as long as I could and perhaps travel back to Australia from time to time to see my select friends. But if things did not eventuate the way I envisaged, I could always come back or live partially in London and also in Melbourne. It was better to tell no one where I was going and when. I felt the need to disappear for a while for peace of mind, and hopefully then I could concentrate on a brand new chapter of my life. Speaking of Melbourne and a few select friends, in reality, most of my story up to this point in time was enacted and written there, and therefore a return to this beautiful city would be logical. Robert Louis Stevenson once declared, "We are all travelers in the wilderness of this world, and the best we can find in our travels is an honest friend." Remember Henry W. Longfellow's words? It takes less time to do a thing right than it does to explain why you did it wrong.